So welcome back to the fourth in our series. Actually, I think this is the fifth in our series for Introduction to the Idaho Rangeland Skill-A-Thon. Today we have Jim Ekins, who is our water quality specialist for the University of Idaho. I'm blanking on his actual title, so I'll let him introduce himself beyond that. And today we're going to learn about water quality on the range. Thanks, Jim.
Hey, you're welcome. And thanks everybody for listening in. Yeah, my name's Jim Ekins. I'm the area water educator. I'm based out of Coeur d'Alene, but I am mostly a Northern District educator, but I also do a lot of programming all throughout the state. And it's great to have everybody here watching this, and it's really great to be invited to play a part of this, of the Skill-A-Thon here. So today, well, first of all, I run a citizen science volunteer water quality monitoring program. All of you are welcome to participate. It's called Idaho H2O Master Water Stewards. I'll show you the website really super quick. This is our website, and lots of information here. We don't need to stare at the website for too long, but let's see, stop the share. I'm a little bit new at Zoom, but there we go. I can certify each of you as a water quality monitor if you'd like. You can get in touch with me, and I'm happy to send you the link. It's an online course that you take, and then we'll later do like an in-the-stream practicum where you actually practice the monitoring techniques. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about water quality and what water quality is, and give you some tools that you can use to help protect water quality. Everybody can have a role in that. And everything that I'm going to talk about in the workshop could potentially be on the final test, the final evaluation. I believe there's a better name for that. Gail will have to tell you what that is. But so just pay attention. You might want to take notes, or this is being recorded, so you can watch this, kind of back up and rewatch portions of it. And you can always give me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to answer your questions, and I'm happy to kind of help you through this, because this is pretty complicated stuff. I've spent my life, my career, learning about water, and there's so many facets to water and water quality. It takes forever to learn. You know, you can get not just degrees, but advanced degrees in the topic. Well, let's get right into the presentation here. I believe I'm sharing my screen now. And if anybody wants, this is not PowerPoint, it's Prezi, and I can send you a link to this presentation for future reference too, if you'd like. You can see here's my email address. I will be happy to respond to emails, and I usually do so pretty quick. So send me those emails and be in touch. Okay, so what we really want to do today is talk about water quality and how we all can play a role in protecting water quality. Now, some of the photos on this slide are from our natural resources camp that we teach. Randy Brooks here in the upper left, and me and others teach in kind of near Ketchum every year. And these are students, these are kids your age, maybe a little younger too. And we have a fantastic time. It's the last week of June of every year. So I'd love to have you join us if you'd like. There are 7 key principles related to water that I teach about, and I teach through a program called Project WET. We're going to focus on 3 of these key concepts in today's presentation and in the Range-A-Thon here. So first of all, water connects all of Earth's systems. Water is a natural resource, and water resources are managed. So those are the ones we're going to focus on. Note also that water has unique physical and chemical properties. Water is essential for all life to exist. water resources exist within social constructs and also within cultural constructs. But again, the connecting the natural resources and the management of those natural resources, that's what I'm going to focus on here today in our program. So here's a question for you. Where are all of the different places that you can find water? I mean, we can find water on a lot of places, and let's focus on Earth. Because yes, okay, there's a little bit of water on the moon, and there's a little bit of water in Mars, and asteroids have water. But on Earth, you can find water in a whole bunch of different places. Everything from the ocean to animals. There's water in plants, right? Water is essential for plants. How about lakes and streams? Of course, we can find water in lakes and streams. So water is in a lot of different places on Earth. But what might surprise you is how much water is found in different parts of the Earth. For instance, did you know that 97% of all of Earth's water exists in the oceans? So if you're a drop of water and you're hanging around on planet Earth, you have a 97% chance of hanging out in the ocean, because that's where the vast majority of water is. Now, if you were out on a hike on a hot summer day, or if you were out working all day and you were just tired and you were thirsty, maybe you ran out of your water bottle went dry an hour ago and you're thirsty and hot and tired, would you go down to the ocean and take a big old chug of ocean water to quench your thirst? I don't think so. Remember, ocean water is salty. It'll actually make you even thirstier. So 97% of all of Earth's water is not really accessible to us because it's salty. We have to go through a pretty serious treatment process that takes a lot of energy and resources. So about 3% of all of Earth's water is not salty. Now, the vast majority of that 3% is actually frozen. It's in our snowfields, in our glaciers, in our ice caps. Now, I used to work in Antarctica. I worked on a research base in Antarctica. I was a dishwasher and then a cook. But the South Pole station sits on about 9,000 feet of ice. Can you imagine what 9,000 feet thickness of ice might look like? Imagine an airplane 9,000 feet above you, and think about how small that would look up above you. And just imagine that all being completely filled in with ice. So Antarctica and ice caps on Greenland and Antarctica and certain portions of Alaska and other places far north hold an enormous amount of water. So of that last 3%, there's only about 45/100ths of 1% that's not frozen. Okay, so where's most of that water? Well, it's here in the groundwater. And a lot of it's in really deep groundwater sources, like so deep you couldn't drill a well down to. And in fact, if you're out working all day or out on a hike and you're all hot and thirsty, you wouldn't go and with a shovel and dig a hole in the ground and try to get some groundwater, because it would be far too deep for that. So that's not really accessible to us either. Okay, so what is here at the surface? Well, about 14 hundredths of 1%, 0.14%, is surface water. Okay, now that's lakes and rivers and streams and ponds and things like that. On that hot day, would you go out there to the creek or the stock pond and pull out a cup and chug that down? Ooh, I hope you'd say no, because that water is full of all kinds of things like bacteria. Might have Giardia, which is a protozoan, or some sort of bacteria that might make you really sick. It might have other pollutants in it too. Surface water is very susceptible to pollutants getting into it because it's right there. Things wash off of our roads and our streets. You have pet waste and birds going into it and things like that. So we can't just drink that water. We have to treat it. And that gets us to what water is available for us to drink immediately. Like we can take a big chug out of it, and that is 3/1000 of 1% of all of Earth's water. 0.003% is available to drink. And you know, we also use that drinking water on things like watering, you know, lawns and gardens and washing our cars and stuff like that. And so there's an extra burden on that that very tiny supply of water for us. So we do invest a lot into protecting that little tiny bit of potable water. We make sure that it stays clean. We make sure that the pipes aren't rusty and made of lead and things like that. And you know, we make sure to if we get our water from a well, we make sure to, you know, keep the septic system away from that well. We make sure that the animals aren't grazing right on top of that well, things like that. So that tiny percent of drinking water is very, very precious, and we need to take really good care of that. Okay, so that's where water is, and there's an activity I sometimes do called drop in the bucket. I'm not going to do it here today, but you could imagine where we start with a liter of water and we go down to very tiny, small amounts of water until I have a single drop, and that drop represents that 3/1000 of 1% of water that's potable. And here's another thing. Sometimes I ask, is there any new water on Earth? And the answer is no, not really. All of Earth's water cycles around the Earth and is used and reused over and over again. The water on Earth has been here for at least 3.5 billion years, if not closer to 4 billion years. And you can see here, I've written that out as 3.5 to 4,000 million years, because a billion here in the United States is a different concept than a billion in, say, England, in the British colonies. So 3 to 4,000 million years, water has been circulating around and around. Somebody once theorized that every single drop of water on Earth has passed through a dinosaur. Ew, it's kind of gross to think about. But you know what? There's other processes that make water clean. So sometimes water gets dirty by running across the land and picking up dirt, or picking up bacteria or something like that. But other things clean the water. Soil is actually very good at filtering water and then slowly discharging it into a stream. Evaporation is a form of distillation, and the water that's in the clouds is very, very clean, except for maybe a speck of dust. Take a look at this photograph here. Okay, so this is Burke Canyon. It's one of our kind of mining areas up here in the Silver Valley. Notice that we have all of these houses here, and notice that each of these houses has this funny little outbuilding suspended out over the water. Now, why might they put a funny little outbuilding suspended out over the river like that? Well, those are outhouses. And you can imagine what comes out of the bottom of those outhouses. And it's really gross. And this is how we used to treat our surface water. We used to just not care about it. We would just use it as nothing more than a conveyance system, a ditch to take our water, our waste away. But this is the kind of thing that that results in, you know, heavily polluted water, like in this picture here. So what we've done today, in these days, we have what we call best management practices. We have ways to make sure that we capture the pollution before it gets into our rivers and streams, and we can treat it, or we can put it on the ground, and the soil can help treat that water, etc. So this is the old way of doing things, and the new way of doing things is with things like wastewater treatment plants, sanitary septic systems, and such. Okay. So that is kind of all about the water cycle. Remember, there's no new water. All water has been circulating around the Earth, and if we pollute it, it's very difficult to get that pollution out of the water. Water will hang on to that pollution very, very tightly until it goes through some sort of process to clean it. Now, what do we mean by water quality? What does water quality actually refer to? First of all, there's a concept that it's relative to how it's going to be used. Okay, You see, all of our water bodies provide us with some sort of beneficial use. Sometimes we call them ecosystem services, which is a kind of a big fancy word for beneficial use. You know, we benefit from surface water. We benefit in a lot of different ways. And for instance, one beneficial use might be fishing. Okay, one beneficial use might be drinking water. One might be recreation. One might be irrigation. Now, to balance all of these types of beneficial uses is not so easy to do. And so generally speaking, what we try to do is set our clean water expectations according to the most difficult to attain, which may be cold water aquatic life or drinking water, etc. Here are some of those processes that make water cleaner. First of all, evaporation. I mentioned that before. It's sort of like distillation. It actually, you know, if you have salty water in the ocean, when water evaporates out of the ocean and turns into clouds and floats away, it doesn't carry the salt with it. It stays, it's pretty much just water. Soil does a great job of cleaning water as well, and I mentioned that too. Well, here's some other best management practices. First of all, drinking water is usually treated, certainly in a municipal setting. Your well water may or may not be treated. Your well water may be clean enough to drink just as it is, or you may have an ozone system or an ultraviolet system in your house to treat that water. Vegetated riparian buffers, the vegetation that naturally grows along the edges of streams and creeks and ponds and lakes and rivers, they are very, very important to filtering all kinds of pollution, especially fertilizers and soil and things like that, out of runoff water before it gets to the stream. So they're very important to protect. And again, finding ways to reduce urban and ag runoff. Cover crops, different kinds of tillage practices can reduce runoff tremendously. You know, and limiting or preventing livestock from entering the waterways. You know, don't let them graze down to that protective riparian buffer vegetation. There are ways to provide livestock with water and you know, away from the creek where you can protect that creek. Good forestry and range practices as well are very, very important. There's other range practices that you can do, like, you know, rotational grazing and things like that, you know, so that they don't graze down the grass and start losing topsoil to erosion. And of course, wastewater treatment plants and septic systems and such are also very, very important for protecting our water. Now, what are some of the things that reduce water quality? One of them is soil erosion, and we really, you know, soil takes such a long time to make. Good soil is so important for agriculture and forestry, and a little bit of erosion goes a long way. So we really try to reduce and eliminate soil erosion by growing impervious, growing riparian buffers next to the streams and lakes. Impervious surfaces like roads and parking lots tend to collect pollutants. Like, you know, your car might drip a drop or two of oil or transmission fluid or gas or something like that onto a parking lot. You'll see the little greasy spot kind of in the middle of every parking stall of a parking lot. And that's from 1 or 2 drops from one car, and then 1 or 2 drops from the next car that parks there. Nobody's dumping a bunch of oil on the ground, but 1 or 2 drops at a time will eventually accumulate and add up. But impervious surfaces don't allow the water to percolate down into the soil. And again, soil is great at cleaning water and taking care of pollution. It also increases storm flows. That water hits that parking lot, goes right to the storm drain. The storm drains don't go to the wastewater treatment plant. They go straight to the nearest creek or stream. And that can really change the way that stream flows and make it drastically increase the flows during times of rainfall and drastically decrease the flows during times of no rainfall. And again, it doesn't capture the pollutants, it just allows those pollutants to run right off. And then it also tends to increase the temperatures. Our streams have been increasing in temperature for many, many years, and that's in part due to an increase in impervious surfaces. Poor land uses, land use change can cause an increase in pollution. Again, if it was a pasture and it gets turned into a parking lot, that's one thing. If you are able to do some different tillage practices that helps to reduce erosion, then that's a positive thing. We call these non-point sources of pollution. And non-point sources mean there's a little bit of pollution coming from a lot of different places. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts. That's different from what we call point sources of pollution. Point sources are direct discharge from an industrial site or a wastewater treatment plant where there's a pipe, and you can point to that pipe. You can say it's coming right out of this pipe right here. You can see the pollution here in this in this photograph on the bottom. And on the top photograph, this is Fernan Lake, and it does this every year. This is a cyanobacteria bloom. People used to call it a blue-green algae bloom. And this is due to increases in phosphorus and other nutrients, and also increases in temperature. And this type of thing can be very, very hazardous to your health, and especially to pets. There have been instances of stock drinking water with a cyanobacteria bloom and dying. It's a neurotoxin. There's two different types of toxins. There's a neurotoxin, and there's a kidney toxin, a hepatotoxin, either of which can kill or make you very, very sick. And there have been instances in southeastern Oregon of cattle, entire herds dying, and entire herds of elk drinking cyanotoxin water and dying. It's pretty terrible stuff. So again, reducing pollution will reduce instances of that. So one thing I really try to get across to the youth and to everybody really is that some pollution is visible. Okay, you can tell when a creek is all muddy and full of sediment from erosion. Okay, this is Paradise Creek right in Moscow. Soil and sediment, things like petroleum products. This kind of looks like maybe there is a gasoline spill or an oil spill of some sort. Okay. And then maybe you can see the plastics. Maybe if there's a bunch of paper or plastic bags in the water, maybe you could see it, or maybe not. Nanoplastics, for instance, would be very, very tiny little pieces of plastic that that are attempted to be eaten by the bottom of the food chain called plankton. And so you might not be able to see them. Other forms of invisible pollution can be heavy metals. You might not be able to see at all if a lake or a stream has heavy metals. You can't actually see the nutrients like phosphorus and nitrates, although you might be able to see that the stream turned all green and gross. If there's an acid spill or a chemical spill or something like that, you might not be able to see it in the stream because those are clear. You can't see bacteria. They're very, very small. You might be able to smell water if it's full of bacteria. But every now and then we have to close beaches, especially in the Lewiston area. Sometimes there's so many geese and so many people and the water is so low that they have to close some of the beaches to be safe. And temperature, believe it or not, temperature is a type of pollution. When we increase the temperature of the water, it's harmful to the fish and it's harmful to the aquatic macroinvertebrates, the bugs that the fish eat. So we try to keep these streams and rivers cool, and we do that through a number of different ways. Reducing impervious surfaces, increasing or protecting riparian buffer zones, and trying to make sure that there's some shade over those streams and creeks and rivers. And again, if invisible pollution like nutrients might create cyanobacteria blooms or algae blooms, or fish kills or something like that. Maybe it's so clear, like with acid rain affected lakes in New England, that it's incredibly clear all the way down to the bottom of the lake, but there's nothing growing in it because it's so acidic. By the way, this is a picture of the Cuyahoga River in 1968, and every decade before that, all the way to 1898, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland and other rivers in the United States would actually catch fire because they had so much in the way of pollution. And it was the Clean Water Act that stopped that from happening. Okay, now let's talk about aquatic life. This is going to be a big part of your quiz. If you've ever done any fishing, you're going to be somewhat familiar with some of these bugs and these creatures that live in our ponds and our lakes and our streams. There is a link to a macroinvertebrate identification chart that I've published on the IDA H2O Master Water Stewards webpage. That link has also been I put that link up in the chat feature as well. So check the chat feature. And again, if you need to, you can just email me and I'd be happy to send you the link to this chart. No problem. But this will give you some ideas as to what you're looking at in terms of the bugs. So pollution affects all sorts of aquatic life. There are a couple of different broad categories of aquatic life, and that's cold water, and then also warm water type of life. Cold water life are like salmonids, trout and salmon. They like cold water. And part of that reason is because cold water holds more oxygen. It makes it easier for them to breathe. Warm water fish like bass and sunfish and catfish can live in warmer climates and warmer water, and also can exist with much lower concentrations of dissolved oxygen in the water. Other things include, in the warm water, the more pollution-tolerant species are leeches and black flies and mosquitoes and ooh, gross, things like that. We'll talk about these in just a little bit. When we're looking at, so I'm not a fisheries guy. I'm a water quality guy, and I'm very, very interested in these bugs, these creatures that live in the water that are basically the bottom of the food chain of a stream or a lake, and that are really important to the fish that live in that stream or lake. And we break these aquatic macroinvertebrates down into 3 different categories. And again, this is really important that you know about these 3 different categories. One of them is pollution intolerant. In other words, they can't tolerate pollution. If there's pollution in the water, they either have to swim away or they die. And then there's pollution tolerant down here at the bottom. These are aquatic macroinvertebrates that can handle pollution. Okay, it's not like they like pollution. Okay, if you find a leech or a black fly in water, it doesn't mean that it's polluted. They can live anywhere, but they can also live in polluted water. What you're looking for is the absence of pollution intolerant macroinvertebrates to make a determination if the water is polluted. Our third category is what we call somewhat pollution tolerant. It's sort of a medium water quality group. Let's take a look at all of these. So, okay, so here's your low pollution tolerant. They're intolerant of pollution. Water quality experts will do an EPT analysis of some streams: Ephemeroptera, Plycoptera, Trichoptera. That's just a fancy way of saying mayflies and stoneflies and caddisflies are in that stream. And you can become pretty familiar with these types of bugs, of aquatic macroinvertebrates, if you do any fishing. A clean cold water stream will have not just mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, but will have multiple different species of each. These are broad categories, the family or order of organisms, and within each of these groups, you know, there may be, I think there's well over 600 species of mayflies in the United States. And you might find 5 different species in any given stream in Idaho. Same with stoneflies and caddisflies. You may also find riffle beetles and gill snails. Notice that the opening opens on the right-hand side. This snail has gills, and it relies on high levels of concentrations of dissolved oxygen in the water. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the kind of medium water quality group. You'll often find these in ponds that are maybe kind of warm, maybe a little bit stagnant, but don't have a lot of like industrial pollution or huge upticks in nutrients or something like that. Crayfish are fantastic. They're a lot of fun to check out. There's actually a citizen science project, and I teach teachers and I teach youth about how to identify and then geolocate, reference, you know, where the crayfish are found. And there's a way that we can have you upload data about that. It's very simple and easy to do. Again, contact me if you want to learn more about that. But crayfish can be found in a wide variety of habitats, and some are somewhat pollution tolerant. You may have seen water striders a lot. You'll see those on the lakes and ponds, and even calm stretches of rivers and streams. Some people call them water skippers or water skimmers. Water scorpions are similar too. Dragonflies and damselflies are often found in ponds. And you'll see the adult dragonfly. A lot of you are familiar with what an adult dragonfly looks like. Well, here's a picture of, this is the nymph or the immature dragonfly. And then this here is a picture of the nymph of a damselfly. You may see dragonflies and damselflies flying around, the adult versions flying around together. The damselflies are much slimmer and slenderer than the dragonflies. Dragonflies, when they land, their wings are out like this. A damselfly, when it lands, it folds its wings up right up above its back. So that's how you can tell the difference. And then there's a variety of beetles that you'll find in medium water quality. Water boatmen and back swimmers are very common, as are these crawling water beetles. The whirligig beetles kind of do a lot of little circles in the water. And these predaceous diving beetles, check this out. These guys are gnarly. They can actually, they will pounce on and eat other bugs, and they'll even pounce on and eat, like this one might eat another predaceous diving beetle if it's small enough. I've seen two of them go at it, epic battle style. And limpets, I don't see those very often, but I have seen them. They have a single, like a shell, kind of like a single clam shell, and then they stick themselves to rocks. Pretty cool stuff. And you will find mussels and clams. By the way, generally speaking, you should only find mussels in the substrate, in the bottoms of streams. If you see a whole lot of mussels or clams attached to structures like docks or your boat or anything like that, you may want to report that to the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, because that means that there's an infestation of something non-native. The native ones tend to just be kind of hanging out in the bottom of the stream. Okay, let's go to our third group. These are the pollution tolerant aquatic macroinvertebrates. They're the ones that can handle pollution. Again, they don't like pollution, okay? You can go to some of the most pristine lakes that haven't seen the footprint of human beings and find lots and lots of black flies and mosquitoes and things like that. But in really nice, clean streams, they tend to be outcompeted by the pollution intolerant macroinvertebrates. But you'll still find them in there. So even though you find something like this in a stream or a pond, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily polluted. But worms, and leeches, you know, they can handle very, very low dissolved oxygen levels, concentrations. Planaria, these flatworms are really cool. They have a kind of a triangular shaped head as opposed to sort of a round shaped head. And if you chop one of these in half, you don't have a dead planaria. You will wind up with two planaria, because they will actually grow from either end, or if you dissect them kind of lengthwise. Black flies, midges. Midges are like gnats, except they don't bite. And I'm sure you're familiar with those. Mosquitoes. I haven't seen too many rat-tailed maggots in my life, but those, they, again, can live in highly polluted water. Here's that other kind of snail. Notice the opening opens to the left instead of the right. These can go to the surface, grab a little lungful of air, a little bubble of air, and then sink down to the bottom, where there may be no dissolved oxygen, and it may be highly polluted, and they will eat the whatever dissolved or whatever organic matter happens to be down the bottom, dead leaves and things like that. And then they can surface back again, exchange that little bubble of air for a fresh one, and then go back down again. And then there's scavenger beetles too. So you don't necessarily have to memorize any of these, because again, there's identification charts available for you. And I would suggest that you download one of those identification charts. But this is a big part of the quiz and of the test. And I want you to know some of these aquatic macroinvertebrates and where they fall in the in these different pollution tolerance groups. Okay. One last thing, I don't want to hold you for too much longer, but there are things that all of us can do to promote better water quality, okay? First of all, get out there and learn about water. There's lots of different opportunities to learn about water quality. I do a lot of education programs, and I'm happy to share what I know with you at any time. Do what you can to help keep soil in place, okay? That soil is precious. We need that soil to grow our crops and our trees, and to grow the grasses and the things that all of the rangeland creatures, including our livestock, eat. So keep that soil in place. Protect and enhance vegetated riparian buffers. Do everything you can to keep the stock out of the streams, and limit or prevent livestock from entering waterways, and protect those vegetated riparian buffers. Reduce fertilizer application. Use soil tests to understand just what your soil needs, and only apply what the soil needs to grow the crop that you're interested in growing. So often we just put the entire bag of fertilizer down instead of actually reading the label. And it's very, very important to read the label. So just reduce fertilizer application to only that which you need. Make sure your septic tank is working properly. Just because you can't see or you don't know that you flush the toilet or you do the dishes and it goes down the drain, that's great. But if you have a septic tank, make sure that it's not just kind of leaking out somewhere where you're not seeing it. Make sure that the soil, that the septic system is buried inside of, is still able to handle the wastewater, because it's the soil that does all the work. It's not the septic tank, but it's the soil in and around the drain field that does all the work. And finally, when and where you can, reduce and eliminate the use of plastics, especially single-use plastics. If you can get away without using single-use plastics, we're much better off. We're finding that these single-use plastics are getting into our waterways. And here's a little microscopic plankton. Each of these little iridescent little bubble things, each of those is a little piece of plastic that this plankton has been eating. This plankton has been eating little bits of plastic, thinking it's food. It thinks that this is a little bit of blue-green algae, or not blue-green algae, just regular old green algae. And this plankton is eating plastic, basically. So please, whatever you do, big pieces of plastic turn into little pieces of plastic, and plastic never goes away. It's kind of forever. So the more we can reduce or eliminate our use of plastics, especially single-use plastics, the better off we will be. Well, that's all I've got for you. Now, I've been going on here for probably 45 minutes or so, I'm happy to keep talking about water. I could talk about water all day long, but perhaps some of you have questions. I'm happy to entertain those questions. Let's see. I'll stop my screen share, and I'll be right here, and I'm open for questions. Gail, you have anything for me?
I don't at this time.
Okay, cool.
I've definitely learned some new things about, I didn't realize to look for in the snails, which way their opening goes to determine which species they are. That's really cool to know.
Yeah, it's something that you can learn relatively easily. That if let's see, I'll go back. There we go. I'll go back to that slide with the snail. Come on. And one more. So if it opens to the left, that means it's a lung snail. That means that snail is, can grab that little bubble of air.
Yeah.
Let's go one more. And then here's your gilled snail. Generally speaking, it opens to the right-hand side with the point up. You're looking at it with the point up, and you're kind of looking down at it. So yeah, cool stuff. I always have to go back to my macroinvertebrate identification sheet, really, because half the time I get these confused.
So students can they just Google IDH2O macroinvertebrate chart and pull up that document that you had shared the link for, Jim?
Yeah, they certainly can. And in fact, let me show you how to navigate to that. I'm going to share a different part of my screen. Let's see. Share. Okay, so I'm sharing. This is so you go to University of Idaho, uidaho.edu/extension/IdaH2O. Okay, that's where my website is. go down here to volunteers and click on volunteers. And right near the top, not only can you download the entire Master Water Steward Handbook, but you can download the macroinvertebrate identification key. And this is what it looks like, okay? You have your stonefly, caddisfly, mayfly, and you have a bunch of these things. And see, it's all organized by pollution tolerance, and a few more middle water quality groups on the second page. And then you have your low water quality groups, the fun ones like the leeches. So there you go. So that's how you access that.
Fantastic.
You can download that.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. You bet.
All right. Well, with that, that concludes our educational series for the month of October. We hope that you all have registered for the Rangeland Skill-A-Thon contest, which will be held on November 14th on a virtual platform. And again, that is open to individuals or teams of 3 or 4. If you have any questions about the actual contest or the rules or any of that, please email myself at gsilkwood, GSILKWOOD @uidaho.edu. And if you have water quality questions or want more information about that, feel free to contact Jim at Ekins, JEKINS @uidaho.edu, and we would love to chat with you. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Jim, for your time this afternoon. I hope you get to spend a little bit of some hopefully pretty weather this weekend out on the water, or doing some other fun projects.
Well, I'll be outside anyway, so thanks.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.